life. We'll sing about memory stories that we share. We'll fall deeper in love.
Hello, everyone. Oh, hello, everyone. I got a little bit distracted. I'm like, are we starting? Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Bubble Talk. It's a wonderful Thursday. I hope you guys had a wonderful week. See-through cup. Yes, it's green, and it's going straight to the green screen. This is the cup for the day. It is Earl Grey milk tea with herbal jelly. Just to let you guys know. This this bubble tea, I already drank everything. All I have is like herbal jelly at the bottom left. That's all I got left, okay? So I hope you guys are having a wonderful time. Grab your drinks, whatever drinks you're having right now, whether it's a bubble tea, a coffee, water, or whatever it is. Let's kind of just relax, drink, and enjoy today's Bubble Talk as we talk about comparing yourself to others. Ooh. And I know this is a big topic, just like last week. Last week we talked about burnout. This week's a big topic because everyone has issues with comparing with other people, and it's something that a lot of people are trying to deal with in a better way, okay? So let's begin today's Bubble Talk as we talk about comparisons. All right, so let's think about what people do all the time, and people have a problem with comparing with others, right? We do. We have a problem, and we compare way too much with other people. For instance, people say things like, oh, I wish I was Cristiano Ronaldo. Oh, I wish I was Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. I wish I was Blackpink from Korea because they're dancing, they're so pretty, whatever it is, right? Everyone has these people that they're like comparing themselves to, and they're like, it's either they're prettier, they're more handsome, they got nicer bodies, they make more money, they're more famous. There are just a lot of these different things that we compare ourselves to other people for. And the crazy part is, and we know this happens a lot in our minds too, is sometimes the comparing becomes very toxic. Right? It becomes a very toxic thing, and we're trying to stop ourselves from comparing, okay? So you're going to hear a lot of talks on YouTube, on like a lot of different platforms, even on TV, and people always motivate you like, don't look at other people, only look at yourself, stop comparing because you're so great. And the answer is yes, it's a good message, but I gotta tell you some serious stuff today, okay? Not serious as in serious, like it's gonna get really serious, but I wanna tell you some stuff that's a little bit different than what we thought and what we've learned. So, first thing I wanna tell you is this: it is impossible to stop comparing. And I'm gonna be very honest with you guys, you cannot stop comparing. It is a normal part of your everyday life. Like, if you think to yourself, I have to stop comparing, it'll never happen. And you're always gonna be like, oh no, I'm comparing, so now I'm bad, why should I do this? The reason why it's so difficult is because you can't stop comparing. I'll tell you why. It's just the way our brains are made. See, when you meet someone for the first time, what are you doing first? You're comparing how tall they are, looking at their body, their clothes, the things that they eat. We're always comparing and looking and comparing all the time. Even when you talk, think about it. When you talk to other people, if your friend starts talking to you about sports, sports comes into your mind and you start talking about your stuff about sports. If they start talking about their childhood, it's just the way the brain works. We start talking about our childhood and it becomes very easy to compare. It's like, well, when I was a kid, you know, I like ran like this fast. And then you'd be like, well, when I was a kid, I ran this fast. It's a natural part of life for people to compare with each other. So I'm not gonna tell you today to stop comparing, right? Because let me tell you something. You know, I use the Bible because my whole life has been based on the Bible, my missions trips, being a pastor of a church in New York. I've done a lot of different things, and it's always with me and God and the Bible. And there's one thing you'll notice in the Bible that God does a lot. 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 3. Guess what it says? He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. Do you know how many times the word David is used in the Bible? Every king in Israel, southern Judah, they were all compared to David. God's like, well, that's not what David did. Oh, you're doing good, just like David, just like David, just like David. Like God is comparing all the time with David. You know, it's kind of like that favorite, you know, that when your parents talk with each other and then your mom talks to that mother and then later she's like, hey, why can't you be like their son? Why can't you be like David? Oh, right? You're like, oh, why do I have to be like David, right? And we kind of feel like this is so unfair because everyone's always comparing. Even God was comparing. So here's the thing. Here's the thing I want you to understand is this. God has put it in our brains. Like this comparison thing is a normal thing in our brains. Okay? And interestingly enough, it causes pain and suffering. But what I want to tell you is a very, very important thing is there's such thing as what you call healthy comparing. Right? Is when you make comparisons in a very healthy way, the way that you think. Right? What I got to tell you this too. There are so many things in life that are not good or bad. It's just there, and it's kind of our thinking that makes it good or bad. Example is the internet. The internet is just a tool. It's not a good or bad thing. It's not even living. Internet isn't living. What you're using right now to see me, it is not a living thing that discriminates like going, oh my gosh, look at this short person. I'm going to be bad internet for you, so you're going to be slow. Right? It doesn't do that. Internet is just a natural thing, and it's us humans that kind of use the tool for good and bad. Having comparison in our minds, one thing you have to understand, there is such thing as healthy comparison. Let me give you an example. When you think about people, like great people, like Jesus, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela. Wow, look at what Jesus did, right? When we look at these great people in history, we're inspired, right? When we see great people, like someone who has no legs and no arms but learns how to swim, you're like, what? That's so crazy. And you look at these things and it inspires you and you say, wow, if they can do it, I can do it. It's a very healthy comparison. Oh, look what they did. Wow, you're right. Look what oh my goodness, look what Mother oh my, Nelson, wow, look at so many great things that they did, and it is inspiring. This is what you call a healthy comparison. The problem we have is that not everyone is that great. And when you see someone who's kind of at your level doing something better or greater, anger, jealousy, envy, hatred, like all these things start coming out because they're not like these Mother Teresa, Jesus, and Nelson Mandela, and these people who had like the worst odds. And what happens is we start to look at these people in a very negative way. Like, take a look at this verse. In Proverbs 14, verse 30. A heart of peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. It's true, guys. Haven't you guys ever experienced envy and jealousy? It like brings out like hate. You know, it's kind of like Star Wars. You know, Yoda, right? It's like envy and jealousy brings hatred. Hatred brings war, right? It's kind of like, oh, right? It's true. In our hearts, when you're envious and you're jealous, it really brings negative thoughts towards people. What I'm going to show you is there's like 5 stages of comparison. When you compare yourself to people, there are 5 stages, right? And we're going to start at the very bottom one. The very bottom one is stage 1. And stage 1 is what? It is hate and anger, okay? This stage is when you look at someone and you're like, what? You think you're better than me? And you just hate them. Like you guys seen these guys, these internet trolls, the people that hate? Right, on like Instagram, they'll write terrible things like, oh, you think you're so good because you have this car. Like, they don't even know anything, but they just have this hatred and this anger. At stage 2, it's envy and jealousy. Now, envy and jealousy is like you could still be friends with them, but then what happens is you treat these people pretty bad because you're so envious and jealous of them. So even though they're there, it could be a cousin, a brother, you know, a good friend of yours. But for some reason, because of that envy and jealousy, you start treating that person in a bad way. When you get to stage 3 is actually kind of like a neutral stance. I call it acknowledgement. Which means that you're not affected by it, but you acknowledge, oh, they're good. You acknowledge it. But that's it. You just acknowledge it. Doesn't affect you. Doesn't affect the way that you treat them. You just acknowledge that they're better or they have better things or whatever it is. Now, stage 4 is interesting because a lot of people, when you look at, like, say, Blackpink, BTS, you know, famous movie stars, they have this. Stage 4 is what you call admiration. And admiration is when you look at them, you're just happy. You're happy that they're really good. You treat them better because you just admire them so much, right? It's like when people go to, like, you know, they have an autograph signing of BTS and all the girls like, well, it could be some guys, right? So these people are like, wow, so great. And they meet them like so happy. And then they sign your thing and you start crying because you have so much admiration towards them. And you just look at them and say, wow, they're so good at dancing. They're so cute and they're so pretty. They're so this. And it's like, me, right? And you're like, admire them. And the last one is the one that we just talked about when we look at great figures is Inspiration, like you're inspired by them. That's stage 5. Stage 5 is when you compare yourself and you see someone else and how well they're doing, and you are inspired by them. Like it compels you, and it makes you feel that, wow, look at this person, the way that they live, and it inspires me to live the same way. It inspires me to be better. It inspires me, oh wow, it inspires me to do the exact, wow, I want to be like that too. And that's the place we need to get to, and that's what we really, really call inspired comparison, right? You're so inspired by this. And that's the place that we need to get to, right? We really need to get to that point is when we're comparing ourselves to other people, there is a healthy place. And that healthy place is when you see others doing really well and better than you get inspired by it. So, how do you get to stage 5? How do you get to that point where you're inspired to move and to act by people, right? It's kind of weird what I'm saying today, right? Because most of the time people are saying, don't compare, don't compare. I'm saying, compare. But you got to compare in a healthy way. Let me give you this amazing quote from St. Augustine. He's one of the forefathers of modern day Christianity, St. Augustine. Amazing quote. You know what he says? He says, men go abroad to wonder at the heights of mountains, at the huge waves of the sea, at the long courses of the rivers, at the vast compass of the ocean, at the circular motions of the stars, and they pass by themselves without wondering. It's a very powerful quote. You know, people are always looking on the outside. They're looking to other people instead of themselves. They're looking what other people are doing instead of themselves. What I'm saying when you're inspired by someone is when you look at someone and you compare, it inspires you again. It should be coming back to you. We're so infatuated, you know, social media, other different things shows these amazing people, and a lot of them not even rich, but they're just doing it for their social media. We get, oh my gosh, look at them, their life, but look at me right now. No. It has to reach that point where you can't wonder and pass by yourself if, wow, that's what I want. I want to be inspired. And you get inspired to reach that next level. So let me show you some important ways, 3 big important things to help us to reach that level of being inspired by comparisons. The first one is this. You have to know the measure of success. What is your measure of success, right? You got to really think about that. What is your measure of success? Do you have a measure of success? What is the line that you say, oh, I'm a successful person now? Let me give you another Bible verse, Galatians chapter 6, verse 4. Great verse. It says, each one should test their own actions, then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else, right? You have to have your measure of success. What is think about this. Think about your job. Let's just look at job, because there's so many different things in life you can look at as successful. Let's take a look at what is your career success. What does that mean? Number 1, it means you got to make a living, right? You got to make a living. Like if you're going to have a successful job, it means you got to somewhat make a living. Doesn't mean you have to be rich, but you have to make a living. Number 2 is you need to strive for excellence in that career. And the third thing is, which I think is one of the most important ones, is it's got to be meaningful. Like what you're doing has to be meaningful to you. Let me give you an example of what's meaningful. Like doing these types of YouTubes, talks, podcasts. Like these are the different things that, what is my measure of success? And one of the people I really, really like, his name is Joe Rogan. He's a podcaster on YouTube. And just YouTube alone, not other things. He makes money on other things. Just on YouTube alone, he makes $30 million US a year. He's the richest podcaster. He makes the most in podcasting. Now, think about that. Is that the measure of success, that only when I reach $30 million a year in podcasting, that's when I'm successful? Is that my measure of success? Think about it even more deeply. What about a doctor? Should the measure of success of a doctor be, oh, if you cure cancer? You're telling me that a doctor is considered successful? That measure of success is curing cancer? So anyone who doesn't cure cancer is not a successful doctor? That doesn't make sense. What about a pastor? Because I've been pastoring before. Oh, the measure of a pastor? Oh, the largest church right now in America is Joel Osteen, and it has 46,000 people. You want to be like, wait a second. So you're telling me that as a pastor, my measure of success, my measure is going to be 46,000 people when only one person has that? That's the only measure of success? It doesn't really make any sense, does it? You have to make your own standard of success. What is your measure of success? But people are only looking at other people around them, so their measure of success is ridiculous. That you're going to say that I'm only successful that if these talks make me $30 million a year. Like, that's crazy. But what about meaningful things? Like, I got to think to myself is, well, what about if it affects people's lives? What if it makes people's lives better? What if people can change and get over the difficulties that they're going through in life, and I make an impact in their life? And that's something that's super important to me. You have to, number one, you have to understand your measure of success. What is your measure? And you have to think about that on your own. Not just how much you make. Not just how much you strive in excellence in your career, but also how meaningful is it? Second thing I want you to know is this. If you want to get inspired by people, the next thing you have to understand is you need to know who you're comparing with. Like, what does that mean? Like, when you compare with people, the interesting thing is we only compare bits and parts of people. Oh, I wish I was good at soccer like Ronaldo. Right? You're taking bits and pieces of people. Like, think about this. When people think about Steve Jobs, they're like, oh, I'm so inspired by Steve Jobs because of his ambition. But you know what his life was like? People hated working with him. He was considered a real jerk to everyone he worked with. So much there are stories that people who would be in the same elevator would get out, like make an excuse and they'd leave because they didn't want to be in the same elevator as Steve Jobs because he would start criticizing them right off the bat. He was ambitious, he was visionary, but he was a total jerk. So would you say this? Oh, I want to be Steve Jobs. No, you wouldn't. You'd be like, I want the ambition, but I don't want the jerk part. I don't want the part where people don't like working with him. Like, think about this. People say, oh, I want to be like Jesus. Well, you can't take out the cross. You want to be Jesus, but you want to get beaten and whipped, put up to the cross, and then you'll be like Jesus? And the answer is, oh, well, maybe not the cross. Yeah, but I want to have a character like Jesus. It's so crazy when you think about it, right? You can't pick apart people and just take the best parts that you want. Because the weird and interesting thing is, most people are not even willing to do what they did to get to where they were. That's reality. Most people won't do that. You have to know, it's like you can't just take pieces of people. People are a package. They're the whole package, which means if I want to be like him, everything that he went through in life made him the way he is, right? But we kind of do it in this really unfair way. It's like, well, I want to be like good looking, like Brad Pitt 30 years ago. And then I want to have like money like Mark Zuckerberg. And then I want to be as fast as Usain Bolt. And then I want to be, and you're like, what? Just the fact, you got to think about this. Just the fact that you pick people apart, it leads to our third thing, which is you realize that everyone experiences pain. Like, everyone experiences and has so much pain in their life. We recognize this. How do I know? Think about this. Look at every person you know really well right now. How many of them are not going through something? How many of them don't have like these bad experiences? How many people, like, if you think about all the people you know really well, you know they're going through something, right? They all go through something, and they know what you go through. And this is why when someone says, oh, I wish I could be like you, in your mind you're like, no, you don't. There's no way you want to be like me because I know what I go through. Right? Just think about famous people. Do famous people not struggle? They don't go through pain? Are there not people who have addictions? Are there not people who have like mental illnesses? Are there not people who have disorders? Are there not people who have pain with their family, with friends, and or people who can't handle the stress? They're everywhere. That we even, suicide is not something only for poor people who have nothing. It's for every level. We realize that pain is everywhere, and you got to realize this really deeply. Which comes back to this question is, do you really want to be that person? Like, do you really want to be that person? And if you think about the total package, that you're not just picking things apart, if I want to be Jesus, like, wow, would I go through that? And the answer most people say is, I don't want to go through that. Do you want to be a total jerk, no one likes you, but have lots of money? Well, I could, maybe how about just half the money and not a jerk? You can't do that. It doesn't work that way. You want to be like them, you get everything. Like, there's some people in my life too, like famous comedians, famous actors and actresses, they died because of like overdose, drug addictions, alcohol. They're all there. So my question really, I have to ask you right now, looking at all these other different things is, do you really want to be that person? And the answer is no. If you think about it that way, nobody wants to be that person. And if you think about this really deeply, you should come up with the realization. And the realization is this: you don't want to be other people. If you really think about it. If you have to take everything, you don't want it. And if you think about this, then what do I really want? Then you just want to be you. You don't want to be Cristiano Ronaldo, go through all the things he goes through. You don't want to be Steve Jobs and do all the things that he did in his life. In the end, you realize you just want to be you. But you want to be a better you. And that's why you look at these things and say, oh, I wish I had this, because you're trying to look for something that makes you better. But the problem is we look at them and say, no, I want to be them. Oh, why can't I? And then we start to compare, and our mind goes in this spiral turn, and we go somewhere else. And there's one realization everyone should have. It is in Psalms chapter 139, verse 14. Great verse. It says, I praise you, God, because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. It's the realization of self. Everyone is wonderfully and uniquely made, and you're trying to live your life, the way that you should be living. However, is just about making your life better. It has nothing to do with someone else. What I'm telling you guys is what? Comparing is fine. It's just that when we start going off the deep end into this bad comparisons, but you want to get to the point where even when you look at a friend who does well, you're inspired that someone at your level does really well. Instead of getting jealous, instead of envy, hatred, anger, right, indifference, or whatever it is, you get inspired and say, wow, and you congratulate them and you celebrate with them, and then it inspires you to take action to do something even more. That's the place we got to get to. Don't just admire people. You have to look at them and say, wow, I want to do this too. Which means what? Three things. Once again, number one is know the measure of your success. Where is the measure of your success? What makes you happy, right? What would make it meaningful to you that it's enough? The second thing is what? Know who you're dealing with. Like, know who you're comparing with. Don't just look at one part and say, oh, they're rich, so I want that. But do you know what it took for them to get rich? It's much different than you thought. You don't know the process, how hard it was. And the third thing is you have to realize everyone experiences pain. Everyone does. Across the board. It doesn't matter how rich. It doesn't matter how anything else. Which means what? It means you got to realize you really don't want to be other people. You don't want to go through the same things as them. You actually just want to be you, but a better version of you. And in order for us to be motivated and pulled by and be compelled by this, you have to reach the level where when you compare, you are inspired by people. All right? I hope that makes sense to you guys. It's probably different than what you expected. You're probably expecting me to say, don't compare to anyone, right? And just like, no, this is not it. We just innately, we're just made to compare. But we weren't made to compare and get depressed and feel useless and meaningless and worthless. That wasn't the point. Even when God said, look at David, he wasn't sitting there saying, look at David, he's better than you. No. He uses it as an example. Look at him. He was the youngest kid, and he was a shepherd, and he killed Goliath. What, are you saying he's better than me? No, he's just saying, look, he was this young kid, and he became better, and you could do the same thing, and you could do the same, and it should inspire you. Okay? I hope that helped out everyone. I hope that you guys understand what we talked about today. And if you have any inspiring thoughts, or just leave comments in the room. And even more than this, start putting your questions, right? Question and answer time right now. So I'll give you guys about 5 seconds. Start asking questions as much as you can. Oh, sorry. And one more thing. While you're doing questions, a couple things. Make sure those of you first time, come subscribe on our YouTube channel, Espresso with Sky. Don't just subscribe, but click the bell. So when you click the bell, what happens is you'll get all the notifications when we go live and all the new videos come up. The second thing we need to know is also we have our Patreon account. For those of you who want to support this ministry, there's gonna be a link that you can support this ministry on Patreon, Espresso with Sky. And the last thing is, for those of you who want to go a little bit more deeper, if you want to know and go into a little bit more Bible study, it's every Saturday at 1 p.m. Just fill your name in under the comments. Well, is it under or is it there? It's probably there, right? Or there, right? In the comments, you're gonna have a section where you can sign up for Bible study. So anyone can just kind of sign up, and we'll see you in a bit. So excuse me. Right? So we're going to have time for question and answer. So those of you, I'll give you like 2 more seconds. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple questions. We have here 2 platforms. We have both on YouTube and Facebook. So let's take a look at the questions we have. First question is from Jimmy. Jimmy in KL. And the question is, what's the best way to measure my success? All right, so this is a good question because it's about that first thing I told you guys is, what is the measure of your success, right? Your measure of success is not based upon the greatest people you see out there. Like someone does cure cancer. That's not the measure of success, which means, because if that is, then anyone who doesn't cure cancer is not successful as a doctor. And if we think about that, that doesn't make any sense, right? Which means that you have to sit down and look at yourself. And in those 3 areas, we're talking purely right now only in your career, like professional success. Let's just look at that as one example. Is you have to be able to make a living. So you have to think to yourself, is how much is enough for you to make a living, right? Also, how much you strive to become better and excellent in it. And also, the third thing you have to understand is it meaningful to you, right? How meaningful is it to you, right? And that's something that the 3 things you want to kind of assess while you're thinking about yourself and saying, what would be my measure of success? But it's something that's going to change with time. It will change with time. Because, put it this way, when you strive for excellence, you get better and better at something, then you understand yourself as you might deserve more than what you have right now. But it's something that you should start with a measure. And the measure shouldn't be started with the best of the best of the best. Like for me, as these talks or like podcasts, there's no way my starting measure of success is going to be $30 million a year. Because then I would never be successful in my life. Ever. All right? So you have to understand yourself in this one. Okay? And it's going to take some time. Let's go to Gervin. Gervin in Athens, Georgia. The question is it bad if I want to become like another person? Okay, so we'll kind of differentiate because there's 2 different things. There's one is to admire. No, not admire. What's the word? Aspire. Aspire and admire are 2 different things. Okay, so admiring is okay. Like you look at someone and you're in like that stage 5. You oh wow, you're happy for them. You admire what they do, but to be someone is actually something that is quite impossible. You can be like them is different, right? Yeah, like if you want to be a great soccer player like Cristiano Ronaldo, then what people do is like one person I look at who's very much like this was Kobe Bryant. He passed away this year, but Kobe Bryant, his idol was Michael Jordan, and he just learned and learned. But the one thing you'll see that when Michael Jordan talks about Kobe is, Kobe did learn a lot of things from him, but he made it his own, right? So he wasn't trying to get the same house. He wasn't trying to take the same number. Jordan's 23, and Kobe Bryant was number 8. And even before number 8, he was also 8 and 24, right? So he was 2 different numbers complete. He still wanted to be himself. The goal is not to be someone. The goal is you can be inspired by someone and become like them, right? Because I would say too, like for myself as being a Christian, someone who believes in God, I don't aspire to be Jesus, because I don't think it's ever going to happen. But I am inspired to be like Jesus, seeing the things he does and doing things in a similar way, being the best version of myself. Okay, so I hope that helps you out with that. Let's go all the way over to Lilia in Germany. Oh, Lilia, we've been seeing her a couple times these last couple of talks. So should I compare myself with my earlier self? That is something that a lot of people do suggest, and I do think that's good. But I think a better thing that you should do is you should compare yourself to your progress more than your old self, right? Because a lot of times like, for instance, my earlier self, sometimes you can't see progress. Like, you can't see the difference. Like, you can't see it. Like, for instance, one thing that I try to change in myself is like, hey, don't be too hasty in judgments, right? Or changing my character, like, oh, don't get angry so fast, right? And what happens is if you look at yourself from a month before, it's very hard to see the difference because it's so short. But what I look at is progress. Progress is, well, before I got mad like 4 times last month, but this time I only got mad 3 times this month. That's progress, right? So I really believe, because a lot of things that we try to change ourselves from, sometimes there's not enough to actually see change. And I think what's more important is to look at yourself from the progress that you're making. Like, hey, I exercised, which means I ran. You know, like someone might look at you and say, well, you know, you wanted to lose 20 pounds, right? But you still haven't lost any weight yet. However, over the last 3 days, you ran 2 minutes more, and there's progress, right? You stayed at the gym and you did an extra exercise, and that is progress, right? Or you felt like you were you felt like your form in exercising was much better, so that is progress. So comparing yourself to your earlier self, it works when there's like an actual seeing of change. But like even when we talk about like say losing weight, sometimes you don't even see the change for 3 months, right? You don't even see it for 3 months. And that's why it's sometimes better to, I like to look at it is, compare yourself to the progress more than the actual self, if that makes sense. All right, thank you, Lilia from Germany. Let's go over to Ichigo. Ichigo in Korea. What experience did you have to realize about comparison? Oh, wow. Well, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I've never had like a full comparison as in like, my whole life, wow, I realize this. But my realization actually comes from certain aspects of myself changing within the last 2 years. Certain aspects of myself that I've changed. And that I saw that, wow, this person that I'm looking at, it's so inspiring and it makes me want to change. But the thing that was a contradiction of me was, I would look at people at my level and they would be doing just as much change too, but I would look down on them instead. And that was, and I looked at that as a major contradiction, right? Like imagine if for me as a Christian, I look to the Lord, like, oh yes, oh look at the change, look what he did, and I'm inspired. And then you have someone like who's just like me, who does something so amazing, and I'm not even celebrating it like that either. I'm not celebrating it. It's not that great all of a sudden. Or I might even be angry or jealous at them instead. And I saw the contradiction in myself as, wait, that doesn't make any sense. How can I look at this one aspect and someone else is also changing the exact same aspect, but then one person I look up to and the other person I'm like, well, who do they think they are? Right? And that's for me is, I really believe looking at something small, you can see bigger things also. And I think in your life too, Ichigo, you should look at the small things that you've changed in your life or small things that inspire you, but also look around. It's like, wow, wait, why does that person inspire me and this person doesn't? Well, usually because you see some people on social media and you don't know what their whole life is like. And since you don't know what their whole life or their character is like, you just think they're like perfect. Like, oh wow, I could be like them. Then someone here, you know what their life is like, or sometimes you get into fights, or sometimes you might not like them. So then all of a sudden you're like, well, they're not perfect, so I can't. But the answer is, they're not perfect either. So it's something that my realization was seeing contradiction in myself, that I would celebrate and be inspired by one person, and then someone else who do the exact same thing, I wouldn't be as inspired, or I would even be envious, which doesn't make sense either, right? And so that's kind of my experience. It was never like a total life thing, right? It was more of I experienced something small and it made me realize something much, much bigger, if that makes sense. Cool. Let's go all the way over to Rosalind in Singapore. All right. Rosalind in Singapore says, what should I do if I feel depressed instead of being inspired when comparing myself with others? Yeah. And this is, I'm going to say that, Rosalind, this is kind of a normal part of the process. So like, for instance, remember I talked about the 5 stages? It starts with hate and anger. They're better than me. Oh, you don't want nothing to do with them. It goes up to envy and jealousy. And the thing is, we go through this process. We do. And because you have to understand you're going through this process, don't feel guilty for feeling it. Because we need to go through it. Right? We do. We got to go through it, which means that you have to understand yourself as in, wait, this is part of me growing in understanding this person much better. It's part of the process of growth. Just like when we look on social media, we only see the end result and we think they're perfect or they're awesome. But when you see nowadays, one of the most popular things you see on Instagram is like health. People working out, big muscles, girls with nice bodies. But we got to realize how much effort it took just to get there. And the crazy part is, these people on Instagram doing health with nice bodies and stuff, they're taking pictures of themselves at the gym all the time. But still in our heads like, oh, I wish I could be like that. And the answer is, get in the gym. Their pictures are in the gym every day, right? But we don't realize we're always looking just at an end result. But we have to understand is, even for us, growing in the stages to get to the point of inspiration is not going to be like this. Inspired, right? It just doesn't happen like that. We are growing in it. And the first thing is, we have to understand or have the knowledge. So now, Rosalind, you know that, wow, all right, this is a part of the stages that I'm going through. Okay. So right now, I'm a little bit depressed and I feel kind of bad. Oh, why am I like this? I'm here, which means that I don't understand this person very well, or I may not understand myself very well. It's like that quote from Augustine, right? People do so many things, go to the highest mountains, cross the widest seas, the deepest oceans, but then they pass by themselves without even wondering, which means a lot of times we do have to start to reflect and focus on ourselves much more than what we see on the outside. And then we'll be able to go through this process of understanding, what is my measure of success? Who is this person? Do I know everything about their life? Why they're like this? Right? No, understanding that everyone is experiencing pain. And the realization of self is, yeah, in the end, I don't need to be them. I like this aspect about them. Wow, and it makes me jealous right now. But I know that I have to get to the point I have to be inspired. So what should I do next? Right? And that is something that you have to slowly grow and progress in. So even having healthy comparisons, just because I'm teaching you this, it doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean I have healthy comparisons with everyone either. But to first know it means that I can understand where I'm at in the stages and where I still need to go, how much more I need to understand. And a lot of times, like, if you just talk to these people, see what they're going through in life, you'll see they're just the same as you and they become more inspiring. I'm serious. What? You go through that too? Yeah. Oh, wow. And you did this? Yeah, I just worked really hard for it because, this happened in my life. You're like, wow, how did that happen? This is why this last thing I'll talk about, this is the last question. The one thing that, if you look on those audition shows like X Factor and American Idol and what else is it? Got Talent. There's a bunch of these shows, right? And The Voice. The thing that's really inspiring is not so much the person, what they're doing, is when you hear their story first. Like you hear the stories of, I was homeless and this and this. I was kicked out of my house. I was addicted to drugs. And then I changed my life around and I'm coming to American Idol. We're like, what? And then what happens is we look at that and we're inspired. And sometimes it's just a matter of us sitting down with these people and having good talks with them. Or if they're famous or whatever it is, you sit down and you get to understand what their life was like. That's why these documentaries are amazing. Right? Like even in one thing, like when I go to church, what's amazing is when you hear testimonies, what people's lives were like before and after meeting God. For me, that's inspiring. Like, wow, they were like that, but they came here. So that is one thing I do suggest you try out, Rosalind, is like with these people too. If it's someone you know or someone you're maybe not be too close to, talk to them. See what their life is like. And you will find out that when you get to know these people, they become inspiring. Okay? Well, that is the last question for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. Thank you so much for listening in today once again for Bubble Talk. Just to let you guys know, today's the 19th Bubble Talk, which basically means we've got 19 weeks. So congratulations to everyone here. Next week's going to be 20. So I'm super excited about that. All right, everyone, have a wonderful Thursday. And those of you, remember to sign up for the Saturday Bible study, 1 p.m. We'll put that thing in the link once again. Those of you who want to help support the ministry, we have Patreon. And also those of you, first time, if you want to listen to all the other Bubble Talks and Lockdown Tuesdays and whatever not, we have every single one of them on our YouTube page, Espresso with Sky. So make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
We believe in the same God, but we are on different levels.